Okay.
Wow, magic.
Hello. So first of all, thank you very much, Jenny and Rupert, for inviting us, and thanks everyone for coming. So who we are and what are we doing here? I'm Maria.
And I'm Mark.
We both work as service designers in the Government Digital Service in the data group, but today we are not here speaking on behalf of GDS. We just want to discuss with you about services and data.
And we all had a long day in the office, I believe. So to get a bit like in a different mindset, please all stand up, just to have the blood circulating the proper way. No, like we don't do any dancing now. You can do this later. Feel free. So please, everybody, sit down who have never dealt with data in a digital product or in the service in some way. All standing. Not all standing. Okay.
But it's just me.
Okay. Yeah. Some people sitting down. Okay. Cool. And now, please sit down if you have never had a discussion about the collection of data in a digital service or product. It's the same people. That's interesting. Wow.
Is this ruined the rest of your presentation?
So we hope. So we were really expecting more people to sit down, but this is great. This is great. Really, it's great. Now you can all sit down. It's fine. Cool. That's interesting. Yeah. So we hope we have something new for you in this presentation. But I think we're fairly optimistic nonetheless.
Yeah, let's hope. So first, let's start defining what we mean by service, and of course we quote Lewis down. Service is really simple. It's something that helps someone to do something, or in more academic terms, service is the application of specialized competencies through deeds, processes, and performances for the benefit of another entity. And what about data? So data are facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. And another good definition, commonly organized information collected for specific purpose. So here we can see the value we generate through data. So data becomes valuable like the higher we get in the pyramid. So data becomes information by interpretation, and knowledge is awareness or understanding, and wisdom. Well, who knows what wisdom is?
Wisdom is something for Yoda also. Yeah.
Yeah. And here that we saw the different types of data. So anonymous, pseudonymous, personal or sensitive data, and the arrow is showing the level of care that the level of care increases for our users. So what's personal data? Basically like name, date of birth, address, telephone number. And sensitive personal data could be physical or mental health conditions, offenses, religious belief, sexual life.
So let's bring the two together. Let's talk about data and services. So one thing we truly believe is there can be no service without data. This is of course, absolutely applicable for all digital services. Similarly, as well for analog services. I mean, if we think about the government services, we won't talk about today, but we deal with on a regular basis. There was all the time some collection of data. It was on a sheet of paper somewhere, but still there was always data. And as well, you cannot not design data in a service. Unfortunately, it's not designers making these design decisions very often, and of course this can have terrible implications on the user experiences down the road. But there are always decisions made related to data in the service. Anyone disagreeing with that? Not yet. Okay. Let's have an example. So here is an example of Google, Google Now, Google Calendars, where we deal with hypercontextual information. So where time is included, location is included, and personal data is included, and where very narrow time windows are being used, and geofencing, and all these kind of things. So I was working for almost 5 years for Nokia's mapping department, and of course we were in a mapping company always looking at competitors. And at one point I was doing a bit of research, and was speaking to a user who had a very surprising experience. So she said she was going to an airport, really being close to an airport, and suddenly her new phone was sending a notification saying, well, there's a delay with your flight, and the terminal is not number 4 but number 2. And she was like, where is this coming from? So she was really confused and puzzled. She was entering the airport and did not find this information on the physical board in the airport. So her phone told her something else, and it took, I think, 10 minutes for the airport to sync, basically have the same information. So her phone was basically ahead, which she only realized, of course, later. But she was really surprised of what happened there. I mean, she was a software developer, so she's a very bright person, and then realized, well, obviously there is something related to this notification, which was in the Google Now card, so basically in her Google app. She went to that, found a calendar item in her calendar saying that you have this flight, but she was not booking this flight, so she did not put this information in her calendar. It was actually her boyfriend booking that flight, forwarding her an email to her email account, and this is exactly how this information ended up. And she was really surprised getting this notification and was somehow worried, but at the same time glad that she got this information. And of course, everything was glued together by her Google account, connecting all these services and all these little experiences there. So data in services has implication for its users, but as well for non-users, because to some degree she was not initializing this. And if you think about apps asking you to sync your address book, for example, Facebook might have all the details of your mother, although your mother might be not a Facebook user, right? So it has implications for all the users, or the people who are not using the service. So we think there are different dimensions to that. So we think there are clearly user needs. There might be explicit, there might be there might be not explicit, there might be implicit. But as well, we see service needs, we see clearly business needs, and as mentioned, user needs, and they all have different drivers, let's say drivers. So for the business needs, it's all about improving the offering, so making the service better. The business needs eventually, at some point, look into generating revenue, and then the user needs, of course, it's about fulfilling tasks for people. Making a bit of jump. An interesting quote we heard just some weeks ago in a fantastic podcast by this guy Horace Dado. He said there is no such thing as a free service. So who gets paid by whom before what? This is a question he had. And at our opening slides, we had in the very background, if you noticed, we had the landing page of Facebook. And what it says, if you log out, I mean, who logs out of Facebook? But if you log out, it in big letters says, it's free and it always will be. Well, I think there is now a growing understanding with media picking this up that you are the product. You are the product almost becomes a phrase, right? So there is a slowly growing awareness that this is a thing. And if you look for further evidence, we found this really interesting study that was, I think, 2 weeks ago quoted by the BBC. It was a fairly broad study with, I think, 2,500 participants, and they were asked about trust in services, trust in organizations, and they basically stated that 92. So they found that 92% of these users do not understand how personal information is used. This is a pretty big number. And 57% do not trust organizations to use data responsibly. Again, a fairly big number. 51% say their data is misused. So some things are fundamentally broken if this is half of your users, right? And then we do not trust this number. 16% say they always read the terms
They
and
say,
conditions.
yeah.
So, I mean, some services to some degree even force you now to scroll down in order to click this button, otherwise the button is grayed out. Yeah, so I think this is what people are saying. It would be interesting to see like what people are doing. It might be closer to, I don't know, below 5 would be my guess. Like even this would be fairly high.
Yeah, so here is why, so things obviously sometimes go wrong, and here is why that 57% of people do not trust organizations to deal with their data. Here is an example of the American supermarket brand Target. Is able to calculate a pregnancy prediction score based on 25 products and send coupons timed to very specific stages of someone's pregnancy, thereby, in one instance, knowing about teenage girls' pregnancy before their parents did, which is quite terrible. Afterwards, the manager apologized, but still, yeah, the harm is there.
I think the father was even complaining. He was upset that like, how come you're sending me or like our family these coupons, because our daughter is clearly not pregnant. Yeah. And then there was
it's a teenager, like this is impossible.
And there was a little bit of a concession, and later actually the father apologized because Target was right. Pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Another example from BMW running this Drive Now service in many parts of northern East London. They created a precise movement profile of a car sharing customer, including the route taken, the speed of the vehicle, outdoor temperature, and even the position of the mobile phone during the booking. Basically, in one instance, providing evidence for manslaughter trial. But they were violating their own terms and conditions, because in the terms and conditions they say they do not store any of these data. They only store the location where the car was rented and where it was left afterwards. So they say they don't have any of this information, but suddenly in this trial where this car sharing user was hitting a cyclist, they suddenly had this data. And then I think it was just in summer. They had to justify like how this can be. I think it's not clear yet, but this is pretty scary.
And another example, Samsung Smart TV, which is basically recording 24/7 in your living room. They tell you that you shouldn't speak about sensitive topics in your living room, which is mental. So basically constantly spying in people's living rooms. This is pretty scary. So basically they are collecting and sharing our data with third parties with consent somehow, but I guess no one reads these things. Yeah. So here is what we see, like again back to that 57% of users, like a privacy paradox, because we all get really scared with all this news and everything, but at the same time we say we want privacy online, but our actions say otherwise. So we are like with a really trivial reward. We are capable of doing whatever data we are asked for. This privacy paradox. Yeah, and an example of this, Martin.
Yeah, so this is a scene from a film, the Conversation from the mid-70s, where Gene Hackman is playing a surveillance expert, and here in the scene he's basically taking apart a wiretap flat. So he's trying to find like who is listening there. And 40 years later, users inviting some surveillance experts to their home, even paying for that. I think 2 weeks ago, Amazon launched their Echo in this country, and the main benefit is because it answers you all the questions whenever you have them. So again, this is an example for privacy paradox, where we're really willing to have someone listening to our conversations all the time. And well, what are the benefits here? I mean, we said on the other slide, also on the other slide, that it's about like really trivial rewards, and here it's about like getting the weather report so that we can look outside of the window maybe. It's about reordering toilet paper, and maybe playing some random music if you watch those little clips from Amazon. So is it worth giving up all your privacy for that? I think is a core question as well. Customers and users have to ask. But we as designers have a clear responsibility, and we should pick up this as a mandate to join these discussions. So here are a couple of dimensions. There are ethical aspects, so ignoring moral principles, privacy concerns, where or the services we design are disclosing private matters, as in the example of Samsung. And of course, security risks endangering people. So there were so many data breaches in the last years. I mean, it's almost noise in the news. You stop reading that. Like how many credit card information, how many online flirting portals or whatever get hacked, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah, and the problem with that, I think, like we've normalized it. We don't get scared anymore about it, which is like, what the heck? Designers should be ethics over aesthetics. Like we need to become a bit more critical when we are designing all these products or services. Like this is our task also, to look after ethics. If we are the advocate for our users, so we need to get this one right. Because at the moment, data is being dealt on that side, like service needs and mostly business needs. And designers are on this side with user needs and not being taken into account. So basically all the data decisions are on that side. And yeah, sorry, you want to say?
I mean,
Okay.
so we shouldn't be only looking into how can I reset my password, and do I use a magic link instead of a password, like these kind of things, right? This is often the stuff we are only discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is the case, some things are fairly broken.
Yeah, so we believe that as designers we need to be more critical on what we do, and we are responsible to balance these three things. So we work for government, and it's easy for us to put user needs in the center. But when you go to the private sector, you of course have business needs, of course you have service needs, and I think, we think, that it's in our role to balance these three things.
And in even government, we have the same problems. I mean, it's not rosy.
Or bigger.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so basically by being critical, we don't mean like getting really academic or anything. It's basically asking questions like, why data is this service collecting? And really, really important, why are we collecting this data? How and when is this data being used? Do we really need it? How is it? Who has access to this data and who owns it? Really important. And how do we keep it secure? Of course, we don't know the technical part of it, but we need to be aware on how it works and how is it going to be handled. Yeah. Here are some positive examples now, when things go well.
Yeah. So one good example is when you start looking up information on the BBC and how they deal with privacy. So they have this really accessible, lovely written page. It's like small chunks of content, keeping your info safe and sound. You find well-structured answers to obvious questions, and one thing they state there: our privacy promise covers how we treat your data and put you in control of what happens to it. It's based around three main areas: transparency, choice, and trust. And again, this is linked to some degree to the numbers we looked at earlier. So they are addressing the problem of trust. Second example.
Another example. This is a picture from COP Digital team. Some ex-GDS people working there. And if we zoom in this image, that's one of their principles is we put people in control of their data. We build so the users are in control of their personal data. They and only they will choose who can see what. They are working on a prototype for an app which is called Paper Free at the moment, which is basically an app that allows you to capture documents as like bills or tickets, stuff like this, like pretty sensitive data or personal data, and then archive it, basically. So, and they are applying these principles to this kind of products.
And another example is Clue. It's an app that got a bit of attention because they started picking up a battle with Apple some time ago, because Apple was not allowing some cycle tracking. So many female users are like, Apple, like, what's wrong? You have a health feature. How can it be that 50% of user base cannot track like the really basics? So Clue is a female health app for tracking period, tracking PMS, tracking fertility, ovulation, these kind of things. So clearly very, very sensitive data. And what they say is you can use Clue without creating an account, and if you do, you will not share your data. If you wish to use a Clue Connect, which is one important feature there, however, you do need an account, and once you create an account, your data will be hosted on Clue's servers. They have all the privacy statements very accessible on their page, and they are actually making all this data anonymous, and then contribute to large research projects around female health. But they state at every time, you are the legal owner of this data. You just grant us for a certain period of time usage rights. So you always have the choice of like opting out, pulling this data, and they talk as well about where the data is stored. So it's all on German servers. So like it's not a US company where it's a bit safer, right? I believe this, at least, being German. So there are some really interesting principles. Sarah Gold, she used to work for GDS for a while. She was some time ago coming up with a couple of principles for design for data, and we believe these are very useful, actually. So what they do is they basically answer or give a bit of guidance for the questions we had earlier. So the first principle is that keep other services in mind. Second one is collect minimum viable data. The third one being be transparent. The fourth, get consent. Fifth, put users in control of their data. And the sixth, separate the data. So in her blog post, it has sort of like a governmental angle, public sector. We had another look and applied the private sector lens, and what we can conclude from that, or like take away from that. The first one, keep other servers in mind. Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Don't lock users into your servers. I just had, I think it was last week, some friend posted, oh, I'm trying to leave Runkeeper. I want to use this other running app. How do I export my data? How can I take this away from one service? Because I do not want to lose all my training data of the last 2 years. And if you lock the user in, well, of course it's nice to for the service manager saying, oh, the user can't leave. But if the user wants to, the user should be able to do so. Then consider what value the data could create when used in other services as well. I mean, the best example is actually Facebook. When they started all their Facebook Connect some 5 years ago, you went to all kind of pages and you had like the faces of your friends who liked this page or trusted this content and whatnot, right? So they're sort of like interesting examples out there. And then think about API usage as well. So if it's potentially like even bulk data, so what kind of implications has this? If you can like take big chunks of data, again, what are the implications for privacy, for breaches and whatnot? Second, collect minimum viable data. So what Maria said, ask for the data you really need. And not more. Question what you really need to know. So one example we like to use is talking about, do you really have to ask for the date of birth? Or do you just need a confirmation from the user that the person is over 18? Often it's just about that. there's no point of really saving birthdays. Facebook did it quite early. They were later creating features around that. The question is, what do you save and what do you not save, or what do you not store? So personally, I had plenty of discussions with Nokia's chief privacy officer, Henry. We spent hours in meetings. He said, like, you will not collect this data because you cannot make the case for what features, for what kind of mini service experiences you will use this you will use this data for, and we are not Google. We are not doing that. So we always had to make a case, actually, a data case. Why are we collecting this? And this was a good mental exercise. So think about data breaches, think about hacks, and think as well about requests from regimes. So Facebook, Apple, Twitter, they're all facing the third thing often, very often, and they have all this, like, what is it, the bird in the coal mine? So that they have this little flag where they say, okay, we didn't have a case in the last 3 months where any government asked us, and when they do not have this flag open anymore, then they obviously were asked by some government, but they're not allowed to state this anymore. So think about that, and then be transparent. So explain to users what data you keep, for what reason, and who owns it. In the example of Clue, this is very well handled. The same with the BBC, it's very transparent. So state what data collect, use, and store, as well where you store it, again, something that Clue did, and share this big data potentially with the world. So again, like Clue has all this rich information about female health, so they make it anonymous and share with researchers so they can use it for a better, bigger purpose. As well, the German counterpart to Monzo, number 26, they just released data on usage of a small feature about, like, sending money. It was really interesting to see just, like, what are usage patterns. So it's sometimes even really interesting for users to see these kind of data in an application, basically.
The fourth one, which is get consent. Really, really important. I think this should be one of the first ones. And basically, like, get consent, so you use simple language so people understand what they are agreeing to. Like, it's not 60 pages, 60 PDF or 80 PDF pages. So, like, let's not bury details in, like, long documents that no one is gonna read, not that 16% either. And allow them to revoke consent. So if they change their mind, it's pretty fair that we allow them to revoke. The fifth, put users in control of their data, as the examples we've seen with Paper-Free. Give users a choice to share the data or not. I think what Clue is doing is brilliant. Like, that's what every app or service should be doing. Don't force account creation, which is same as Clue is doing, and allow full deletion of account and data. This is something that not happens really often, so we need to get this one. And this is more technical but quite important, which is separate the data. So you have to decouple services and data are not the same thing. We need to keep them separate in order to be more safer. And link personal and sensitive personal data wherever possible. This horrible term is basically take out all the sensitive stuff, put a code or whatever for that individual, but in a way that it cannot be identified. That's what it means. And separate data, which is basically separate data on people from data on things. Yeah.
Plenty of talking. Let's go into action mode. Exercise! Thanks. So this is just a starting point. It just was all about, like, making you think about the stuff in a potentially deeper sense. Few takeaways.
Do you want to take it?
Yes.
Sure. Takeaways. If we are not acting as users advocate, no one else will. It's basically the graph we were showing before. Like, these decisions is rarely a designer involved in that, and it's part of our role to be users advocates. So step up your game. we are not only designing services that are easy to use and that are pretty, but they need to be really considering and being critical about why are we doing it, and really like is with the example of data, but you can extrapolate this to whatever or to apply to whatever, like why am I doing this? So I think the main key takeout for me with data is like, why do we need this data, and what are the implications that this is having in the user, and not getting so individualized, because sometimes with talking about the user, we get really into the individual, but also like all those patterns, it's not only about the individual, it's about groups and about collectives and about communities and about society. So all these things I think we need to, it's not to get into the discourse of like the designers, so we are always guilty about the climate change and about consumption and everything, but it's true that we need to we cannot stay anymore in the comfort zone. We need to move and question all these things.
And I think this is what we saw as well from the different groups. At some point there was a question, so what is the difference between question number 2 and number 3? So the why we're collecting this data, and 3, what is the experience that it might enable? Because the reason why might be linked to one user, but the experience might be, as Maria just said, like a way bigger thing. So what does it enable for other users? The association of certain telephone numbers that suddenly appears for not only you, but as well as many other users. So like this cross-referencing thing might be pretty scary.
Yeah, another example is with geolocation. They know where you live. They know when that building was built. They know the structure of that building. They know how many rooms are in that house. Like there's lots of things to read out of that. And another thing is like, where is that data being stored? Because like we talk about the cloud. Where is that cloud living, and which politics are over that cloud? Is it US politics? Is it those things we need to keep in mind.
So a few things. Actually, again, 6 points. So please join discussions with other team members, and they might be way more tech savvy than you, but you can ask questions and ask them to break the stuff down. Like, so, I don't understand what are you talking about? What kind of implication does this have? In any case, we will share the slides, so you can just digest the stuff later and have another look, another thought. Then apply Sarah's principles for design for data. And they might relate to different things in your specific circumstances. They're different services, so just use them as input, as a lens, basically, to think about the stuff. And then, ask why. Ask why again, and then once more. Because often we're easy to satisfy. It's like, oh, this could be a good experience and so on. But like, so can we really make a case that the benefit is higher than the risk? I think this is one of the things. So we
and do research. Research on that one. Like, we don't have to make the decisions for the user. So do research on that.
And design for the worst cases. So this is what we talked earlier about, like separating data, where you do not associate and put everything into one pot, because this pot might be stolen, might be leaked, might be hacked, whatever. So if you can disassociate this with a username, if you do not even store the date of birth, so there's only a certain user ID, you can't make this cross-references. So you can make it by design harder to deal with hacks, for example. And then consider as well data accumulation over time. So what is sort of the data flow, the value flow of data, not only in the first few weeks, but after a couple of months, after a couple of years, because all the data that Facebook, for example, is collecting, that's huge, right? And when they started, they didn't know, and they do not know what they might have 20 years in time, but you can start projecting there and at least have a workshop sketching this out, what might this be. And then as well, tweak your tools. So for example, like if you look in a service blueprint, recently we had this where we said like, oh, we're adding here on purpose an additional swim lane. We look at the user tasks, certain user roles, looking at some really big services, but what is the data that is being used, and what is associated data? What is data that is actually not used yet, but that might be useful there? So like add this to your tools as an additional layer, and then it will create by default your awareness in the moment you tweak your tools, right?
So, yeah.
So we think it
here.
ain't proper service design if you aren't designing for data in the service. So consider that, and yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Questions? Comments?